Hello, welcome to episode 3. It's been a little bit since we chatted. A lot has happened. So thank you for joining me. I'll give you a quick little rundown of what's been going on in my world. I'm gonna share some projects that I've been working on. And then at the end of this episode, I have kind of a fun little surprise. I did a yarn inspired by one of my favorite books. I think I mentioned it in the previous video, so we'll go into a deep dive there, but stay tuned because I'm gonna give y'all a little preview of what the yarn looks like. Okay, so I had my yarn pop up. This was a lot of fun. I got to meet so many new people. I got to see so many friends here in Seattle. It was at Acorn Street Shop, which is one of my favorite yarn shops, just like ever. Mary and Janet are the owners, and I love them so much. Like every time I go, my cup is so filled. It is a lot of work, and it's very different from kind of my day job, which I work in project management / product management. So very different type of world. Like normally I work from home right here. So going out and like seeing people is a big difference. But it's so much fun. So that went really well. Shortly after, I got really sick, I was down for like a week. I was like debating going to the ER. I'm okay now, but yeah, I got really sick. And then right after that, I had some really big work things come up that I can't talk about yet, just because there is some nuance behind that, but there are some really big things coming up for me in my professional life as well as my personal life. So that took me out for like a solid 2 weeks just to like sort through all of that. Good news is I got a lot of knitting because that is how I process stress. I go through kind of like I need to either get outside, get some fresh air, or I just need to sit down and do something tactile. So I've done a lot of knitting. I also had leg surgery. So I had a mole removed on my right shin, and I had to go to a specialist because of where the mole was. So I have 8 stitches in my leg right now, totally fine. The mole was cancerous, but I caught it at such an early stage, and I've already gotten the results back from the removal after the biopsy and everything that it is 100% gone. So go to a dermatologist. Even if you don't think you need to go to a dermatologist, it's always good to just like do a checkup like once a year, once every other year. Because I have now officially technically had skin cancer, I have to go back in every 3 months just for the next like 2 years, I think, just to make sure that it's all checked up. So I've had a lot of downtime, a lot of craziness. So I know I want to do this like every other week, every 3 weeks. This one, life got in the way a little bit, and that's okay because I want this to be a fun experience and I don't want it to feel like a chore. So I took my time to make sure that I can invest in myself, and then I can come back to this YouTube space and I can talk to you all. Okay, so first project that I have finished. I finished my Cascades cowl. So this is the Cascades cowl Infinity by Jamie Lomax. She is also a Seattle-based designer. She just does these beautiful, stunning color work charts. Like if I could say she's known for anything, it's just beautiful color work and being a good human. We share a lot of similar values just in life. So I had such an honor like knitting up this pattern. So this is in my Persistence DK base. So it's 100% superwash wool. I used novel pages for this kind of off-white cream color. And then I used a custom colorway that I made called the Night Court based off the book series Akatar. I had this completely sell out at my pop-up, which was really cool. There's actually a friend who brought a friend to the pop-up, and he like bought everything that I had of this color in the Persistence DK base. I have a few skeins in, I think, my ritual fingering left. So if you like the color, I have a fingering weight version that is 100% non-superwash. So it looks slightly different, and it's gonna have more of like a rounder, kind of more of like a woolly texture to it. Not quite woolen spun, but it almost looks like that just based off how the yarn is worked up. So yeah, but I'm obsessed with this cowl. It's so cozy. I posted it on my Instagram. I love wearing it. It's been really cold. And it's like art. It's so beautiful to look at. So yeah, that is the first thing that I have finished. Okay, before I forget, what am I wearing? Because I always seem to forget this. So this is the Hot Toddy hoodie. It is knit or designed by Jamie. I'm getting all my words up. So okay, this is the Hot Toddy hoodie designed by Knitatude, who is a really good friend that I've made through Instagram and through a book club that I'm part of. Knitatude just radiates like super badass woman confidence, and every time I see her post, she brings me joy. And so she put out this call quite a while ago to do a test knit because she kind of wanted to dip into menswear and creating garments and breaking the whole sweater curse. So I was like, I'm all about that. Like, I don't need no curses in my life. I want to knit this. I want to support you. So this is knit in an Aran weight yarn. I used loops and thread impeccable. And it is in the colorway Putty. So I believe the pattern was initially used Vanna's Choice, which is kind of an acrylic wool blend. This is, I believe, 100% acrylic. I'll put it in the show notes. And it's so soft and it's so fuzzy and it holds up really well. I was worried about pilling, but it actually hasn't pilled too bad. Like I could probably give it a little bit of a shave. But each time I wear it, it just gets softer and softer. And it has a really cool hoodie. I don't know if you can see, but there's some like really nice, simple back spine detailing as well as down the sides. What I love about Knitatude's patterns are they're intentionally designed for like beginner to intermediate. So it's like, rather than just doing like a straight raglan sweater, it has a little bit of like a finesse to it. And then it also is so like beginner friendly. So if you are ever looking for a pattern that's beginner friendly, easy to knit, it's going to be relatively quick to knit up, definitely check out Knitatude. I always recommend her pattern, and I've worn this a couple times at my pop-ups, and people are always like, oh, who designed that? And I always tell them Knitatude. She has hundreds of patterns out. She's got quite a few. She's got a ton of patterns, so definitely check her out. Okay, the last thing, I finally finished this baby blanket, and I'm gonna open it up. I always wanted to like have that like almost unboxing us, so I'm gonna open it up in a second, but I want to tell you the story about this baby blanket. So I have a really good friend, mentor, coworker who had a baby boy, and I promised to knit her a baby blanket. And I wanted something that's a little bit more simple in nature. So originally I was just gonna do this gorgeous seed stitch. And I had just bought some really nice driftwood needles, and I was like, I'm gonna use these new needles and I'm gonna knit this baby blanket and I'm gonna love it. Do not knit a blanket and seed stitch with wood needles. Do what you want, but I was miserable. It was so not fun to knit. And I also had just cast on way too many stitches, wasn't here for it. So I ended up ripping it out. And then I was having a few glasses of wine and I was like, I need to get cracking at this baby blanket. So I cast on for a second time and did it again. I cast on way too many stitches with metal needles, and my gauge was totally different. So this is one of those times where I was knitting tipsy and frogging sober. So if you know Knitting Tipsy on Instagram, definitely pulled that one. So then I did it a third time where I started with less stitches and I actually knit the border as I created it. So I did a small seed stitch border and then just a garter baby blanket. And this is my Persistence DK yarn as well. So it's 100% superwash because I wanted Mama to be able to throw it in the wash or something. And it turned out so cute. It is garter stitch, and I actually, garter stitch is sometimes not very forgiving because you can see everything and you can see all the little imperfections. You can see all of the, just like where tension is off a little bit. And I actually really love that. So this is the baby blanket that I knit for my friend, and I'm gonna ship it off here really quickly off to the mom and the baby. The baby is actually now 7 weeks old. That is how long it has taken me to knit this baby blanket. I started while she was still pregnant, and I struggled to finish this, but I'm so glad I took the time to do it right. And I poured so much love into this, and so I hope mom and baby love it so much because I really do love it. So that is gonna get shipped to them very soon. I just want to take a few photos. Okay, last thing that I'm currently knitting on, and I cast this on last night, is my friend, also a coworker, has been asking for a beanie for a really long time, and I said, yes, I would totally do it. And she said, okay, I have this beanie. I love it. I love the fit. It's the only thing that really I can wear consistently. So this is a obviously machine knit beanie. It's double layered, so it's basically a giant tube that they then fold together. They cut the fabric and stitch it up. So I basically am replicating that process, but doing it hand knitting. And so I basically, what I did is I found a pretty even middle ground gauge, because if you notice, this hat kind of flares out at the bottom. The stitches are a little bit cleaner and tighter up at the top. So I had to find a way to like, okay, what's the right gauge for that fit? And so I found my gauge off of that, did a couple swatches, felt really good. And then I did a few measurements, and I also counted the stitches, and I was like, okay, how am I gonna piece this together? So I figured out how many total stitches I needed to get the desired brim width, like how many stitches to get around. I did a provisional cast on, and then I'm now just kind of knitting in the round. So I'm using my sock yarn. So it is a blend of superwash merino, mohair, and nylon. Use the provisional cast on. So that way when it's finished, I left a really long tail. I can actually like cinch it up. I can basically thread this ending all the way through, cinch it up at the top, and then I'll probably do the same. I'm not sure if on kind of the outside, so this will be tucked up on the inside at the brim, so you would never actually see this, and this will get folded over, sort of like that. I'm not sure quite yet if at the crown, if I want to do a decrease to kind of give it some shaping, or if I want to cinch it. So TBD, we'll follow up next time on what I decide, but I have a lot of knitting to do. And this is actually pretty mindless knitting for me. It's just 1x1 ribs, so knit one, purl one, really easy going, kind of mindless knitting. So I've been watching a lot of holiday movies. This was like one movie worth of knitting. Mind you, I did do that provisional cast on with a crochet hook, and then always the first and second rows are always super hard, especially in fingering weight yarn. So I would say if I were to do a whole movie to this, I could probably get a couple inches in. All right. Okay, so last thing I'm gonna show is, I'm super excited. Okay, we're gonna talk about the book Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukafka. So Danya, I actually met at the yarn store, Acorn Street Shop. She used to work there, and she's such a kind, sweet soul, and I really enjoyed getting to know her, and I want to spend a lot more time getting to know her and hanging out with her. We've had a coffee date one time where we just got together and like knitted and catched up after all of my life craziness. Okay, so I am going to give you my reading scale of how I decide to rate books. And then I'm going to talk about the colorway that I've already showed with her and got her permission on basically what inspired from this book. So 1 star book for me is probably didn't finish it, not good, don't like it at all. 2 stars is I finished it, I didn't really care for it, never really going to remember it, never going to read it again. 3 stars is, okay, this was a pretty good book, but if you ask me about it in a year, probably not going to remember much. It didn't really move me, but like I enjoyed it. 4 stars is, oh, I really, really like this book, but there's something that I wanted different, something that I wanted change, something that like just didn't feel great. Probably won't read it again, but I'm definitely going to think about it, and I'm definitely going to remember a lot of details later if you ask me about it. 5 stars is, this book spoke to my soul. This book changed my perception. I can't get it out of my head. I think about it constantly. I'm definitely gonna reread this book because I'm so obsessed with it. So if you go onto my Goodreads, I've been really bad about using that framework. This is probably something a little bit new that I've just kind of decided how I want to rate books, because I think I want to get more into like reviewing books and discussing books. So for this book, I'm going to give it, it's like on the cusp of a 4 and a 5, so like 4.5, but I'm gonna go with 4 stars. And the reason is I probably will reread this book at some point in time, but it's a little bit more of a slow mystery, and I really love kind of that epic, aha climax moment, or like sort of that you get in high fantasy. So I'm gonna give it 4 stars because I'm on the cusp of whether or not I really want to reread this book in the near future again, but I've definitely thought about it a ton. I wanted to do this yarn behind it, so 4.5 stars for this book. If you haven't read it, it's really good. So basically, what is this book about? It starts with a man who is on death row, convicted of murder in Texas. And the story revolves around these 3 women that are central to this man's life. And so there's Lavender, who is the man's mom, the guy who's on death row, his mom Lavender. Safi, who is the detective behind the case trying to find the man who did the murder. And then there's Hazel, which is the sister-in-law of the man's wife. And so these women just had really strong emotions behind them. Everyone was very unique and everyone was very different. And I kind of picked up on this overarching emotion that I felt from these women. And so I'm going to start with Lavender, who is the mom. And I think she felt so much guilt because she had abandoned her son, basically. And she had to do what was ultimately best for her and move on with her life. But there was a lot of guilt and a lot of emotion behind that. And so for me, I did some color theory and like research, and green kind of had this revolving feel around guilt. So there's some green in this yarn. Safi, who is the detective, she was so determined to figure out what had happened, who did this, and her willpower. She almost put her personal life on pause in many ways to devote herself to her career. And she just had such strong determination. So that was like a very yellow, bold type of color. And then you had Hazel, who was the sister, basically the sister-in-law to the man on death row. And she had this bond with her sister, and she had this bond with her family, but something felt off or something felt right. And there's tension around family, around this tension of what does family mean versus what does she want, individualism versus familiar affair. So I don't really know how to describe it, but there was a bond and an affection. And I just got this overwhelming feeling of that. And so I decided to channel this into a colorway. So I'm gonna stop, I dyed it up in 3 of my bases. The first one, which is my sock yarn, which I've shown many times. It's a blend of superwash, nylon, and mohair. And this is the colorway. So you have the green that really represents the mom, Lavender, who just is like feeling so guilty about everything that she's done. You have this really bold yellow that is Safi, the detective, who was so determined to figure everything out. And then I intentionally put Hazel, who is the sister-in-law, kind of in the center. So when you unroll it, you're gonna have the solid green, the solid yellow, and then kind of this pink that kind of ties everything together. And that is that bond. And so I just thought, what a beautiful way to blend kind of these emotions and these feelings together. So on opposite ends, you have guilt, determination, and this bond, and there's something that pulls it all together. And I really felt that that's what Hazel did, is kind of pulled the story together from the emotional standpoint. So I specifically put that in the middle. So when this gets knit up, you can actually see the pink is what's tying it all together. I was a little apprehensive. I didn't know how these colors were gonna work together, but they did. So I'm really proud of this colorway. I also have been playing around with kind of this silk veil base. So this is a blend of mohair and silk. And I think this base turned out really cool. I think this would be really fun to kind of pair with something a little bit more of like a neutral color, like a gray, an off-white, or like a cream color, just to kind of add this really fun warmth pop to something, whatever you're wearing. But I am so happy with how this specific one, like this is very clear and very pronounced color. This is still clear and pronounced, but it actually, I think the halo of the mohair just makes it feel more connected. So these two. And then I've been playing around with Suri, and Suri is something that I have never done. So Suri alpaca, but it's also a lace weight yarn. And this is actually really fun. I actually feel like this is a lot more of a muted. So if you look at a lot of my palettes, they all kind of have this sort of dusty undertone to all my yarns. I feel like this yarn base, and this is the first time I've ever dyed with this, really encapsulated that. So it kind of pulled those elements of that dusty, chalky feel and just left the essence of the color there. So I was expecting this to be a lot more bold and pronounced, but I think it actually is really fun. And I kind of want to knit up a swatch just to see how it works together. But it's so soft. It's like unbelievably soft. Like this is the softest yarn I definitely have. Like this, you kind of get the mohair, so there's a little bit of like the scratchiness to it. If you like really push into it, it feels super soft, but like once you kind of just really softly touch it, you get some of the scratchy. Again, the same thing here. This has quite a bit of nylon and the mohair in it, so it is a pretty stiff feel and kind of does have a really woolly scratchy. This is like the softest thing. Like you want to lay your head on it. It feels like a pile of feathers. So I will plan on posting these yarns on my site before I post this video. So it will be up by the time that this video is posted. I only have a few skeins of it. It's just, I thought this was a really fun way to tie together my love for books and yarn. I really want to lean into the emotional aspect of it. So what am I feeling? So sometimes I'll do books or yarns that are inspired off the cover of the book, because that spoke to me. Sometimes it'll be a character within the book. Sometimes it'll be just like this energy or this feeling that I get from a book. But I feel like it's just a really cool way to like tie it all together. So right now I am rereading A Court of Thorns and Roses. As you can tell, I'm obsessed with it, and I just want to feel moved because there's been so much going on in my life. So I think I'm going to do maybe my next colorway will be specifically from that book, not pulling in any elements from later books in the stories, but really what I felt and then the emotions that I've gotten from that first book by Sarah J. Maas. And so, yeah, let me know what you think about the book and the yarn, because this is something that brings me a lot of joy and it feels very creative, but I also want to hear from people who would buy the yarn, because if no one buys it, I can't keep doing it. And I get that books and yarn aren't for everyone, so I want to hear what you think. So let me know your thoughts. That is it for episode 3. Probably went a little bit over on the length that I wanted to. Try to keep this around between 10 to 30 minutes on the max side. I really like to keep this under 20 minutes, so we'll see how I can do that, but I felt like I had a lot to share on this episode. So thank you. I hope you had an amazing holiday season, and you have a happy new year, and we'll talk soon. Bye.